behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream.
Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take to you Mary, your wife, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. And she will bring forth a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins.
For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lewdness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile a man. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. Therefore, whoever confesses me before men, him I will also confess before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, him I will also deny before my Father who is in heaven. Assuredly, I say to you that it is hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And again I say to you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back here tonight. It is episode 41 of the Bible Lens podcast, and having a little bit of an audio issue, but that's more on StreamYard's end. It's not actually out of my end, but I just want to let you guys know that. So if the audio is a little bit out of sync here tonight, just know that it is StreamYard. It is not mine, but I'll try to fix it the best I can throughout the course of the night. How are you guys doing tonight? So this is going to be a very, very big episode that we're doing here tonight, because this is something that we've been alluding to throughout multiple episodes. We just did one not too long ago. I think it was 38 or 39, entitled How the Christ is King whole deception. Was pretty much a preview of what we're going to talk about here tonight. And we're really going to hammer this one home. Before I get started here, I just want to go ahead and give you guys, a quick little shout out and a thank you for your support of this podcast over the last few weeks. Over two of the last 3 episodes that we've done, ever since we shifted over to Sunday night, have done massive views. The one on Black culture, which I believe was either 38 or 39. It's one of those two. I forget the exact number, but that one did massive numbers. I think it's up to like 900 views on that one. And then last week's episode that we did here with Technical Work Rate Productions, talking about essentially the rise of Satanism within WWE, that also broke about 1,000 views this week, and is still growing. So thank you for everyone who has been supporting us here throughout the last couple weeks for that show. Hopefully you guys keep that momentum going for this one, because we're going to talk about something that I think a lot of people are seeing it play out here in real time, whether they realize it or not. This is quite literally the Great Deception. We're talking about a preview of what the tribulation is going to look like. What is the final 7 years of the church age, or what is this whole thing going to look like? What is the essentially Jacob's trouble, the redemption of Israel? What's actually going to happen? What is the world going to be like during this time period? We're seeing the pieces being put together right now, and we're going to go ahead and lay out the entire case. How, yes, there will be a coming Christian and Muslim alliance in this time period, and that this alliance is quite literally going to lead to the death of billions of people. So, a very important episode. I'm gonna go ahead and lay out the whole case for you here, but let's go ahead and introduce some of our guys who are joining us here tonight. I know there's gonna be some people joining us throughout the course of the show. Leslie Tarkin's already the first one here, saying hail to all you lovely people. Thank you for joining us here, Leslie. Vanya also joining us here. Saying evening Bible buddy, good evening to you too. Even to everyone, we are live on Rumble, we are live on Twitch, and we are live on X as well. Twitter, X. I mean, you guys know what it is at this point. So let's go ahead and get started with this. I want to go ahead and show you guys this before we get into any real context here, because this is going to be kind of a deep dive, and you're really going to want to have a good understanding of how this is all unfolding, how this relates to biblical prophecy, and why we're seeing biblical prophecy, I should say, play out in real time in front of our faces. Quick little shout out to Brandon, who's just joining us here, saying even to Brandon as well. So let's go ahead and get this started. This is a video that I saw circulating over the weekend. This is something, I don't know exactly where this took place. I know it was like some kind of university, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody said this is George Washington University. So this is in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, just 5 blocks from the White House. This should not surprise absolutely anyone. But what you're seeing here in this video, I'm going to play it for you here, is a group of students and other people who have all come together to take a stand against the Zionist regime. So if you guys don't know by now, I know how you don't know. There's a big conflict going on right now with Israel and with Palestine, and it seems like the majority of the world at the moment is taking the side of Palestine in this conflict. We'll get to why that is relevant and why that is important here. But as you get to this video, keep in mind you're watching Muslim students, you're watching some Christian students, some Catholics, even some Jews in here, and a whole bunch of atheists all coming together to take part of the Muslim prayer. And I'm just going to show you a video that I'm going to give you guys a window of what exactly you are watching and why this is something that everyone should be paying attention to. Don't care about the NFL draft or what's going on with Biden and Trump and Saturday night. This is what you guys really should be paying attention to. Let's go ahead and play this video from, I believe this was last night this took place, last night or the night before, but here's the video here.
اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم.
So, like I said, you're seeing a bunch of students come together here, and they're all protesting Zionism, or let's be very, very clear here. They're protesting Israel. They're protesting Israel. They're protesting anyone who's on the side of Israel during this conflict, and they're all coming together to, I guess, show allyship to the Islamic opposition of the nation of Israel, which comes from, you know, the Islamic religion, Palestine, a lot of the Muslim forces in that region, and everyone's coming together. And if you guys have been paying attention to social media, to news media, entertainment, there's a lot of groups out there who are essentially taking the side of Palestine in this conflict. You've seen hundreds of videos over the last 6 months of people all over the world. This isn't just something that's happening here in the United States. You see this happening in Europe. You see this happening in the Middle East, even in Australia, places like this, where everyone's coming together to take the side of Palestine over Israel. Why is this happening here? Brandon says, I heard Harvard took down the American flag, replaced with the Palestine flag. Yeah, you're seeing this all over the place. Everyone is making an allegiance with the Palestinian resistance to Israel. You're seeing this all over the world. And what you're seeing here, what I try to hammer down to so many people, is that when you really get into these conversations of like deep doctrine and what you're like really seeing the world for what it is, it's such an eye-opening revelation, because what you're seeing here is that everything the Bible has told us would happen during this time period is happening right now. So and I hate to sound rude to our non-believing friends out there, or the ones who are kind of on the fence about this whole thing, but you always hear, when we're talking about the Great Deception, about how Islam plays this role, Judaism plays this role, Catholicism, Christians, how everything plays this role to how this is all going to play out. And then you have to go back to like our atheist friends who are still like begging the questions like, well, I don't have any evidence that God actually exists, so why should I believe in God? You just think to yourself, man, you are just purposely not paying attention to anything that is going on in the world right now. And someone said it very clearly. This is the spirit of the Antichrist. Now, let's jump ahead here to Revelation 19. I found this very, very interesting here. And before I get into this, kind of explain the context of what is happening here in Revelation 19. You're seeing essentially the armies of the Antichrist. So the Antichrist is here on earth. He has been accompanied by the false prophet, and he is gathering the armies of Satan, who have gathered the entire world, who control the entire world, the world's forces, the world's army, and they're gathering together to go to war against the returning Jesus Christ, who has come with the armies of heaven. And they have all essentially drawn the battle lines where it's God's side and then there's Satan's side. And these two sides are going to fight during this last time period. And you got to think to yourself too, it's like, when you say that quite literally the entire world is going to be lined up against God in the end times, and they're going to be on the side of Satan. Like, these people are going to pledge their allegiance to Satan during this time period. You think to yourself, how can that possibly be? How can it possibly be that the world, knowing essentially that there's a God and that there's a devil, how is the world going to all team up as one to side with Satan, to side with the devil, to go to war with God, as God is here on this earth? And this is what you're seeing here in Revelation 19. So this is Revelation 19. This is verses 11 through 21. And I want you guys to really pay attention to what is happening here in this verse. Now, this is the second coming of Christ. This is Christ coming back to earth, no longer as the lamb. He came the first time as the lamb. He's coming back the second time as the Lion of Judah. And he's coming back to bring wrath to the enemies of his people, the enemies of Israel, and people who have pledged their allegiance to Satan during this time period. So this is not the fun-loving, hippie Jesus that people have portrayed over so many years now. This is literally the wrath of God during this time period. Here's what's happening. And now I saw the heaven open, and behold, there was a white horse, and he who sat on him was called Faithful and True. In righteousness he judges and makes wars. His eyes were like a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. He had the name written that no one knew except himself. He was clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name was called the Word of God. So this is very, very clearly making a reference to Jesus Christ. And I'll go all the way back to look at what we talked about with Genesis 1, where it talks about in the beginning there was God and the Word was with God. It's clearly making a reference to Jesus. So God, quite literally in the form of Jesus Christ, will return during this time period, and what's being described here. And then the armies in heaven, clothed in fine linen, the white and clean, followed him on white horses. Now out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, and with it he shall strike the nations, and he himself shall rule them with a rod of iron. He himself treads with the winepress of the fiercest and the wrath of the Almighty God. And he has it written on his robe and on his thigh the name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Now, this is Jesus Christ coming back in full glory during his second coming, and he's coming back to make war with the armies of Satan during this time period. This is well deep in the tribulation period. The armies of Satan have essentially laid siege to Jerusalem, to the nation of Israel. They have spread worldwide rule. They have pretty much the majority of nations on their side. The majority of nations are under their control. And what you're seeing here, let's go down to the 17 here for a second. And I saw an angel standing in the sun. He cried out with a loud voice, and to all the birds that fly in the midst of heavens, come and gather together for the supper of the great God, that you may eat the flesh of the kings, the flesh of the captains, and the flesh of mighty men, the flesh of the horses, and those who sit on them, the flesh of all people, free and slave, both small and great. Then I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him who sat on the horse and against his army. So what are you seeing here? God is here. He has brought the armies of heaven. Literally, the heavens have opened up, and that God has come with his armies. He is coming to take down the armies of the Antichrist. And what happened here? The armies of that beast, the Antichrist, and the false prophet have gathered the armies of the world, and they're about to go to war against God. That's what's happening here. It's so clear. There's no way to interpret it any other way. Satan has rallied an army to go to war against God during this time period. Then the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet who worked signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who worship his image, and that these two were cast alive into the lake of burning, burning with fire. Sorry, the lake of fire burning with brimstone, and the rest of they were killed with the sword and proceeded with him from the mouth of him who sat on the horse, and then all the birds were filled in their flesh. With their flesh. Well, what is happening here? Quite literally, the armies that have pledged their allegiance to Satan during this time period have come together, and they have gone to war with God, and then God very, very easily dispatches of both the Antichrist and the false prophet. He throws them both into the lake of burning fire forever and ever. And then what happens here? The armies that no longer have their two leaders, the birds of heaven are quite literally going to feast upon their flesh, which means that this is going to be a sound, overwhelming defeat by God and his armies against those who have pledged allegiance to Satan, to the Antichrist, to the false prophet, and that those people are going to suffer eternal torment forever and ever for daring to go and stand in opposition of God during this time period. Now, when you read this, it's very, very powerful. It's a window out there for true Christians, because we talk about this all the time, you know. When you talk about the things that are going to happen with Revelation, you know, the mark of the beast, you know, the wrath of God that's being poured out, or the locusts that are going to torture men for 5 months. It sounds absolutely horrific, right? But it's only horrific to those who refuse to believe the gospel, and who have essentially decided that they're going to take the side of Satan over the side of God during this time period. Why? Because if you're a believer in Christ, if you're a believer in Jesus, if you're a believer in the one true God, this should be the ultimate white pill for you. Because what you're seeing here is that you are seeing God absolutely dismantle the armies of evil on this world completely and entirely. Like, it's going to be a battle, it's going to be a war, but it's not going to be in a war in a sense that this is going to be some long drawn out battle. The armies of Satan are going to get absolutely wiped out and destroyed. This is exactly what's going to happen here in this time period. And like I said, over and over again, you hear the theme of the Bible is do not fear, do not worry, do not be afraid. Why? Because if there's even the Psalms that says this: if you are on the side of God and God is on the side of you, what do you have to fear? Because who is there to go against God? And the answer is no one. Not even Satan himself can go toe to toe against God. So what you're seeing here that for believers, for us, this is going to be a glorious day when God comes back down to earth and he absolutely wipes the floor with the armies all over the world who have led so much evil, so much death, and so much destruction during this time period. But you have to understand this too here. Like I said, we're talking about a window to the future here where the armies of the world are rallying against God. Who are those armies? Who are the people who are foolish enough to essentially think that they can go to war against God during this time period and actually think that they can win? Who are these people? Well, we've talked about this many, many times before. If you've been listening to this podcast over several weeks and several episodes, I strongly believe that when we talk about the religion of this Antichrist, this one world religion that's going to dominate the world during this time period, we are talking about the religion of Islam. Islam is Satan's demonic counterfeit to Christianity. It is Satan's demonic counterfeit to everything that is truth in the Bible. What he has done is that he has taken all the warnings and all the promises that were promised in the Bible and completely flips them on his head. And essentially what he's done here is that he has tricked the world, especially a specific group of people in the world, to think that somehow they're going to be on the side of God during this time period. And what they're doing now is like they're on the side of God. And there's a lot of people here. Let's jump ahead real quick to the book of John. This is John 16. I want to prop this up here real quick for you guys too. And this is something that I read not too long ago. I think I may have gone over this here in previous episodes, so I'm just going to reiterate it for you guys again, just in case you guys haven't heard it before. But I listened to this verse, and even though it's not specifically talking about the tribulation, it's such an eye-opening a verse, because this is pretty much the mindset of these people who are quite literally going to be on the armies of Satan during this time period, going to war against God. Why would they do something like this? And well, listen here, John 16, this is verses 1 through 3. And this is Jesus Christ talking here. So the man who was quite literally wiping the floor with the armies of Satan in the future, this is what he says here. He says that these things I have spoken to you, that you should not be made to stumble. They shall put you out of the synagogues. Yes, the time is coming where whoever kills you will think that he's offering, that he offers God's service, and that these things they will do to you because they have not known the Father nor me. So what is Jesus saying here? Well, he's talking about synagogues. Who is that in reference to? He's talking to the Jews. And then this is something that I know that's been growing on social media here. Please don't fall for this in case you have, but there's a lot of people out there who are pushing this narrative very strongly on social media that Jesus Christ was never a Jew, that he was always a Christian, and he has no reference to the Jewish people whatsoever. You hear these people calling themselves Christians on social media who are pushing covenant theology or replacement theology, saying that God is done with the Jews, he's done with the Jewish people, there is no more Israel, we're Israel, the church, the believers are. You hear people saying this all the time, right? And what they're trying to get you to do, this is what you have to understand the game plan here is. And I'm not saying these people like specifically like they actually know what they're doing. They're all essentially pawns in Satan's game. Satan knows that this battle is coming. Satan knows that this battle is coming, and it could be coming in the very, very near future. So what he's trying to do is that he's trying to deceive as many people as he possibly can to be on his side during this battle. So you have to think to yourself, because there's so many people, Christians, who believe that Jesus is somehow done with the Jewish people, God is done with the Jewish people, that there is no more Israel, that the Israel that exists now is it's like some Zionist banking conspiracy, like it's all about the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and all this stuff. People who believe this, what they're trying to get you to do is that they're trying to get you to become an enemy of the nation of Israel and an enemy of the Jewish people, knowing that there is a battle that is coming where there's going to be two sides, and you do not want to be on the side that opposes Israel during this battle. I'm telling you this right now. You can have whatever jaded opinions you have about Israel during this time period. When God comes back, and he comes back to make war, he's coming back to make war against the enemies of Israel during this time period. So if you find yourself to be an enemy of the nation of Israel during this time period where Jesus Christ, the real Jesus, comes back, it is not going to end well for you. If I just read there in Revelation 19, is not going to end well for those people who think that they're going to go to war against God and against Israel during this time period. Liz Target says Christ will speak one word and those enemies will be destroyed. Like I said, it will not be a pretty picture for those people. And pray for those fools, because we know that there's going to be a lot of fools during this time period. And the reason why there's going to be so many fools, because they're not listening to the warnings that God has already given you. God has essentially laid this whole thing out for you so that you know what is coming, so that you will not be on the side of the enemies of Satan, of the armies of Satan during this time period. But guess what? A lot of people simply do not listen. That passage of Revelation makes me want to stand up and cheer. Yeah, because like I said, Jesus Christ is going to come back. He is going to lay waste with evil during this time period. And it should be a very big white pill for believers out there. Mark Dice, the Hodge twins, Lauren Chin. I'm guessing these are all people who are against the nation of Israel right now. By the way, in case you guys, and this is something that I haven't really talked too much about here. We all know that we're in an election year right now. So we all know that we're all in on like Biden versus Trump and all this whole thing. I know the polls are saying that Trump's leading right now. We'll see how this whole thing goes over the next few months, because there's already like a plea being made here for mail-in ballots. So we're going to be doing the same thing we did 4 years ago. And here's my perspective. I'm not really that invested in the election this year. I'm just not. And I'm coming from the perspective of, if I had to pick between the two, clearly I would rather Trump be president of the United States. Obviously, I don't, that goes without saying. But here's what I'm saying here. Trump being president of the United States does not guarantee that what God has already said is going to happen is somehow not going to happen because Trump is president. If you think that, put it this way, if you think that Trump is the savior of the craziness that's going on in our world right now, you are just as blinded as so many other people who are blind at the moment. So that's why I'm not really all in on this whole political thing. And I know there's been a lot of political commentary back and forth. I just don't see it from the Democrat / Republican angle anymore about this whole presidential election. It is a much bigger game that's happening out here. I'm more focused on the big game that's happening. I've been seeing some old school preachers on the raptures, some good stuff. Yeah, like I said, I haven't done a video specifically on the rapture yet. I should do one here in the next few weeks, because from my perspective, and I'm just going to let you guys know how I feel. From my perspective, I believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. I haven't gone into a video really discussing that in detail yet. I will in the future, but I believe in pre-tribulation rapture. I do believe a rapture before the tribulation, because for me, when you understand what the 7-year tribulation is, and it is God's redemption of the nation of Israel, when you're talking about the trouble of Jacob making a reference that it's not talking about me, it's talking about the nation of Israel. This is God's redemption of Israel. He's focused the last 2,000 years on the Gentiles. Now that the Gentiles will be fulfilled, he's going back to the nation of Israel. This is why I tell people, look, you don't have to defend the things that are happening in the nation of Israel right now. Why? Because God's not focusing on Israel right now. So you don't have to essentially defend a lot of the things that you hear Zionists say, or a lot of the things that you hear a lot of the Jewish people say. You don't have to defend that on this level, right? So people are saying about, oh, but the Daily Wire, and oh, but Ben Shapiro. It's like, yeah, I get it. I don't like any of those guys either. Here's what you have to understand. God has not given up on his people. Whether you like this or not, Jesus Christ is Jewish. He was the Jewish Messiah. The Jews are still God's people. And unless you believe in some perverted replacement theology or covenant theology that allows you to believe that God is now done with the Jews, there's going to be a time period in the future where he goes back to focusing on the Jews, and he will go back to save his people from the armies of the Antichrist, who will siege them in the final days. So understand here that this is something that will happen in the future. You don't have to defend everything that's going on here right now. We're talking about, oh, which side are you on? You on Israel's side or you on Palestine's side? Understand what these two sides are, and it makes it a lot easier. That's what I will give it to you. But yeah, I do believe in pre-tribulation rapture. I will try to argue this from kind of a pre-trib and post-tribulation, because I'm not going to talk about like post-millennialism and all-millennialism, because to be completely honest with you, I believe that those two beliefs are complete heresy. A lot of them originated from the Roman Catholic Church for the very reason that they're trying to distract you from what's coming next, which I'll prove to you guys here in a bit. But yeah, do not listen to a lot of the people. Even look, there's a few people out there who I like beforehand, and I don't agree with any of the takes that they're making here. Do not side with people just because they have the same quote unquote political opinion of you. That's not what's happening here. German time fell apart. They had a place that ignored the enemies within the church and the government. I do believe so. Preacher breaks down the rapture and the second coming of Jesus. Rapture is for the bride, the second coming is for the people. Fair enough. That's probably a better way to put it, because I agree with that one too as well. So the red pill community thinks that Islam is the next victim of feminism with protest. Like I said, let's go back into this here. So we talked about Revelation 19. We talked about the warning that was given in John here. So What are we seeing here? Let's go back to this whole the focus of this, which is this coming Chrislam deception. Where do we get this idea that there's going to be a union between Christians and Muslims? Where do we get this? Well, where we get this, we fast forward over to Revelation 17. So I've read this verse many times before. We talked about this in depth in other episodes. So you want to go back to when we asked the question about who the whore of Babylon is. We talked about this who's going to side with the Antichrist. I've done many videos about this, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to focus on this passage here. This is Revelation 17. This is 11 through 18. Now, this is giving you kind of a context of not only the beast, the Antichrist, but the whore of Babylon as well. So what are we seeing here? It says here in verse 11, the beast that was and is not, is himself, is also the eighth. So this is very confusing for a lot of people when you say that. It's like, well, the beast that was and is not and is himself. What does this mean? Essentially, we're talking about the beast in the beast system. He's going to be ruling a Roman Empire that has not yet come forth yet. So what you're saying is that you're going to see remnants of the Roman Empire of the past, the one that fell, and then the one that essentially no more. But there's also going to be a revival of this Roman Empire that you won't see until the tribulation period. And a lot of people think that, this is a representation of the Roman Catholic Church. And when talking about the Roman Empire, I do believe the Roman Catholic Church plays a very big role in this, but I don't believe that is the role of the Antichrist and the false prophet. I'll explain to you why here in a second. But going back here, verse 12, the 10 horns which you saw are the 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as the kings with the beast. So this is the 10 horns, the 10 kingdoms. This is essentially going to be the 10 nations of the Antichrist. We don't know specifically what these 10 nations are. I've alluded to several that I believe that these nations will represent. When you look at what the Bible says, you're looking at places like, Egypt. You're looking at places like Syria, Saudi Arabia, Iraq. There's a number of nations here. And I don't think it's any coincidence that all of those nations are Muslim majority. But we'll get to that here in a second. There are of one mind, and they will give power, and they will give their power and their authority to the beast. So these 10 nations are all going to be under the rule of the Antichrist. They're going to give their full authority. So he's going to be quite literally be the full-blown military leader of these 10 nations. Well, why? How does he attain this much power in this a short period of time? I'll explain to you here in a second. These will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them. So it's telling you here that these are the nations who will go to war against Jesus during this time period here. So if you are in one of these 10 countries or one of these nations that very well be on the side of the Antichrist during the tribulation period, I would probably get out. I wouldn't want to be there, because things are probably going to get far worse before it gets any better if you're specifically in these nations. But then again, at the same time, this is something that's going to spread all across the world, as we'll see. They will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them. He is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, which will basically just reread what it says there in Revelation 19 just a second ago. And for those who are with him are called chosen and faithful. And it says that then he says to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits. And this is talking about the harlot of Babylon here. So the first part of that was about the Antichrist. Now this is about the harlot of Babylon. Are the waters which you saw, which the harlot sits, are many peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So this harlot system is different from the beast. So they're making it very clear that the beast and the harlot are not the same entity. But the harlot also sits on many people, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Now, as we said here, as I believe that the religion of the Antichrist is Islam, and that this Antichrist figure is going to be their Mahdi, which we'll talk about here in a second, who is this harlot of Babylon. If you go deep into Revelation 17, it gives you a very clear picture who this entity is and what city this entity represents. It's making it crystal clear it's talking about Rome. A lot of people will try to twist the scriptures in any way they possibly can to say, no, it's not Rome, it's somebody else, it's America, or it's Jerusalem. Read Revelation 17. It tells you very, very clearly what city this harlot represents. If you try to go to any other verse outside of what 17 is telling you, you're essentially going to get Heresy, a wrong answer. It's Rome. So what are we being told here? This harlot, this great harlot, which if you look in the context of the Bible, is a false religious system, the way it is described, and it emulates from Rome. I hate to break this to you, it's talking about the Roman Catholic Church. Now, somebody brought up a very good point, which I actually agree with, that while the harlot is in fact talking about the Roman Catholic Church, one thing that you have to understand is that this harlot has many daughters as well, which means that the Roman Catholic Church has had many offsprings of the original church over the course of the last several years. You see these offsprings in the Orthodox Church, and yes, you see this in a lot of Protestant churches like as well. And it shouldn't be kind of a surprise that you're seeing a lot of people over the last few weeks, over the last few months, all of a sudden proclaim that, hey, you know, I've been a Christian all this time, or hey, I'm just now getting into Christianity, and now I'm going to join the Roman Catholic Church. Like we saw this with Candace Owens, I think last week, just announced that she's joining Roman Catholicism because her husband is a Catholic, so she's going to Rome, quote unquote. Shia LaBeouf is another big name who just recently went back to the Roman Catholic Church as well. Russell Brand announced that he's a Christian now, allegedly, and he's been deciding where he's going to join Roman Catholicism or Eastern Orthodox. I would probably put my money that he's probably going to join the Roman Catholic Church here in the next coming days or in the coming weeks, but that's a whole other situation here. So what you're seeing here is that we talked about this harlot that sits on multitudes, nations, and tongues. Okay, look at the world that we live in right now. There's 1.5 to 1.7 billion Catholics in the world, right? So we're not just talking about just simply Rome. We're talking about here in the United States. You look at a lot of places in Europe, obviously. Look at places like Rome, France, Poland, obviously, is a very, very big one. You look at places like South America. How many Roman Catholic strongholds exist in South America or in Africa? So this harlot is sitting in many, many nations and many, many tongues. And this is a representation of the stronghold that Roman Catholicism has on the world. Let's see it here. It says, but the 10 horns, which is the nations that are online with the Antichrist, the 10 horns which you saw on the beast will hate the harlot and make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put it to their hearts to fulfill this purpose, to be of one mind, to give their kingdom to the beast, until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman who you saw, that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So where is the headquarters of the Roman Catholic Church? You guys all know that this is talking about the Vatican. Like I said, if you read Revelation 17, it makes it crystal clear that this location is Rome. Only Rome was responsible for the death of many saints throughout the course of centuries. We've talked about this in previous episodes about the Inquisitions and kind of the curling of the Roman Catholic Church. Anyone who was deemed a heretic, anyone who opposed the papacy during many, many centuries were killed, because at that time you were not allowed to challenge the rule of Roman Catholicism in many of these countries. And God has not forgotten the blood of the saints that the Roman Catholic Church has been responsible for all this time here. So it says that floor. Yep, I saw that too. I saw that too. Probably gonna have to do another episode about Freemasons as well, because we all saw that floor. We all saw what that represents. I mean, like I said, it's all tied together. All of these things, like I said, the Jesuits, the Freemasons, the Catholicism, it's all tied together, and you're seeing it in plain sight, which is why it's so important to be in the Word and to have the Holy Spirit guide you, because the Holy Spirit will show you things that, let's be honest here, it just goes right over the head of a lot of people. Like, a lot of people are completely blind to what's happening in the world right now. But when you start noticing things, you start to pick up, it's like, oh, wait a second, I know what that means. And if she's part of this group and I know what that group represents, that means that there's something going on here and it's not good. And it's a warning sign that these are the things that you need to avoid. The Constantine merging of the paganism in the Roman Catholic Church. That's the thing, right? And this is how we're always told about it from the Roman Catholic side, is that, oh, well, back in, I think it's like the 3rd century, we went to war with pagan Rome and we defeated pagan Rome, and pagan Rome became Christian Rome, and we Christianized Rome and we started the Christianized world. Is that actually what happened? Or did the pagans that you guys tried to essentially entice to join Christianity, did they actually take over what was then called the Roman Catholic Church and is now largely become a pagan church? People talk about this. We've talked about it before here too. There was, when they were trying to get the pagans to convert to Christianity, they were using a lot of pagan religion, a lot of pagan holidays, a lot of pagan teachings to essentially integrate them into Christianity. You see, like, see, you guys can do basically the same stuff that you guys were doing in paganism, but do it here in Christianity. Well, God makes it very, very clear, especially in the Old Testament, you do not mix what is of Satan to what is of God. So if they were really the one true apostolic church, they would have completely wiped away paganism entirely. They would not have tried to use paganism to entice people to join Catholicism. That's not how you do it. God has made it very, very clear that there's a reason when we're talking about the Canaanites, or when the Jews were wiping out the Canaanites. There's a reason why God wanted them wiped out in the first place. There's a reason why he doesn't want there to be a mix of these two groups, but because so many people just don't listen, we end up getting this over and over again. So, well, what are we seeing here in the little short Revelation 17 here? What are we actually seeing? What we're seeing here is that we're seeing that there will be essentially a union of the harlot who sits on many waters, many nations, many tongues, and the 10 beast kingdom. So during this time period here, you will see a union of what I believe to be Roman Catholics and the nation of the Antichrist, the kingdoms of the Antichrist, which, let's be honest here, are Islamic nations. So Revelation 17 is telling you here that there will be a union between Catholics and Muslims during the end times, and is going to lead to the deaths of many, many people. Now, this is, keep in mind in the context here, this book in Revelation was written anywhere between 90 to 96 AD, right? So you're talking about a book that was written about almost 60 years after Christ's death, resurrection, and ascension. But this is when this warning was written. Now, at the time period, and why for so many years people believe that the Roman Catholic Church was the Antichrist and was the false prophet in the beast system, is because for many, many years during this time period, the Nation of Islam didn't exist. So the Nation of Islam was not founded, or the first revelation that Muhammad got from the angel Gabriel, as we like to say, didn't happen until 610 AD. So during that time period from Christ's ascension to the Muhammad's first revelation, quote unquote, there was no Islam. There was no Muslims. So, like I said, when we talk about a time period where here in the Bible even says that this kingdom has not yet come, which means that it has not yet existed, there was essentially no kingdom for people to point to, be like, oh, this is the religion that we all need to warn about. It was not until several centuries after this was written that we got Islam. And as I said here, Islam makes it very clear that it is the religion of the Antichrist. And I'm not talking about, spirit of the Antichrist. I mean, quite literally the religion of the Antichrist. Because as we talked about with Revelation 19, why are all these people going to be siding with Satan during this time? Why would they do such a thing? Well, you have to understand that what Islam has done is that it has taken the warning of Revelation about the side of the entities that we need to be warned against, that we shouldn't flee against, and they've made them the good guys. So what does that mean? Is that when you look at the Antichrist, the Islam says that the Antichrist of the Bible is the Mahdi. And every Muslim is waiting for the arrival of this Mahdi figure who's going to lead them into a worldwide caliphate where Islam is going to quite literally rule the entire world. And it even says very specifically that it will take over Israel and will take over Jerusalem. Why? We'll get to that here in a second. When we talk about the false prophet, and a lot of people say, okay, well, hold on a second. You're saying that there's going to be a union between Catholics and Muslims during the end times. That doesn't make any sense. Why would they do that? They don't have anything in common. Well, hold on a second. When you look at the description of the false prophet here, do I have this one up? I think I might actually have this one up, just in case. Yeah, okay, I do have this up. I'll go ahead and show this to you guys here. So that way you guys can follow along what I'm saying too. Let's jump over here to Revelation 13. Now, if you guys have been here long enough, you probably heard me read this over and over again, but I'm just going to hit it for you guys again, just in case you're watching for the first time. Why would Muslims and Catholics come together? Well, you have to understand here that the false prophet plays a pivotal role in this happening. And what does it say here? Revelation 13:11. Then I saw another beast come out of the earth, which had two horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And he exercised all the authority of the first beast in his presence and caused the earth and those who dwell on it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound had healed. So what are we seeing here? You're seeing a second beast come out of the earth, and he's essentially giving all of his authority and all of his power for the whole world to worship the first beast, which is the Antichrist. So there's two figures in Revelation that's being talked about here. It's the Antichrist and it's the false prophet. And this is something that is very, very important. There's a lot of people out there who will talk about Revelation and will talk about the role of the Antichrist, especially those who will try to convince you that Revelation has already taken place and that was back in 70 AD and the Antichrist was Nero and all this whole stuff. No one, and I mean no one, can tell you who the false prophet was. Now they'll give you some, I guess saying that, oh, it was some Judaism priest during that time period. It was some Jewish priest who was the false prophet. Well, hold on a second here. Some unnamed Jewish priest was the false prophet, and that's what we're supposed to believe because these events have already happened. Well, what does the false prophet actually do? It says 14, and he deceives those who dwell on the earth by signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded and by the sword and lived. And he was granted the power to breathe, to give breath to the image of the beast, and the image of the beast shall both speak and cause many as not to worship the image of the beast to be killed. He caused all, both great and rich, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, that no one may be able to buy or sell except those who have the mark of the beast or the number of his name. So let's go back here. And it says here, verse 14, that he does signs. He uses these signs to deceive the people that he was granted to do. And if you go even deeper into this, it says that one of the signs that he does, that he brings fire from the heavens. So quite literally, this false prophet will bring fire to the heavens, and then by doing this, he will use these signs to deceive the world into following him, to essentially follow the Antichrist. Now, first of all, who else brought fire from heaven? That would be Elijah. So once again, you're seeing Satan essentially mimic and deceive a sight that Elijah did in the Old Testament, and he's going to essentially use his false prophet to do the same signs to make people believe that he is who he says he is. Now, this is where it gets important. Who is the false prophet going to claim to be? As you guys know, Christianity is not the only religion out there that claims that Jesus Christ is coming back. The other religion that claims that is Islam. Islam believes that Jesus, aka Isa, will come back, and that he will come back to essentially side with the Mahdi. This is how that is explained in Islam, and that he will come back to explain that the Christians had it wrong, that the Jews had it wrong about who he was. He was never crucified, and he's going to essentially do wonders to show the world that he is who he says that he is. So what is this in context? Well, we can tell by reading here that this false prophet who has two horns like a lamb, aka like Jesus, is going to look like Jesus, but he's going to speak like a dragon, meaning that he's going to work for Satan, who is the dragon in Revelation. So what a lot of people don't understand is that you have to look at it from this perspective. How is it that so many people in the world are going to be at war or go to war against the real Jesus Christ? Because by the time the real Jesus shows up, there's going to be a false Jesus on the earth who is going to have already deceived the entire world into believing that he is the Jesus of the Abrahamic religions. So he's going to convince the Catholics that he's the real Jesus. He's going to convince the lukewarm Christians that he's the real Jesus. He's going to convince, obviously, Islam. Islam's going to obviously believe that he's the real Jesus because he's going to be essentially their prophecy coming true. That he's even going to convince the Jews that he's the real Jesus. So he's going to convince all the Abrahamic religions that I am the real Christ. And here I'm going to do these wonders for you guys all to see. I'm going to prove to you that I am who I say that I am, right? And he's going to deceive the entire world into thinking that he is him. Now, something else that kind of furthers this theory. Let's jump over to Matthew 24:24. This is Jesus Christ talking, and I guess we can actually expand this just a little bit. That's 24:24, and let's go to 30 just for now. But I read this here before too. Jesus is warning you. This is about the tribulation period. For false Christ and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. So he's telling you false Christ and false prophets will come to you to deceive you during this time period. This is a warning Jesus gave before even his crucifixion. So he's telling you there will be a false Christ. And we talk about this identity of the false prophet. Who is the false prophet? Well, what is Jesus in Islam? How is Jesus viewed in Islam? He's only viewed as a prophet of Allah. He's not viewed as God. He's not viewed as the son of God. He didn't die for the world's sins. He's simply a prophet of Allah. So this Jesus, this Muslim Jesus that's supposed to return, is going to come back. He's going to identify himself as a prophet for Allah, because that's what the Jesus of Islam is, simply a prophet. There's no coincidence here that in Revelations it described this figure as the false prophet. And then quite literally, Islam came along centuries later. It said that their own Jesus will come back and that he'll be a prophet to the world. Let's continue here just for a second. Therefore, and this is another warning from Christ. So people are saying that there's going to be so many people who are not going to be prepared for what happens in the future, but know that God has given you all the warnings of what is going to happen. Therefore, if they say to you, look, he is in the desert, do not go out, nor look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. There's no coincidence here that Jesus is talking about a desert. He could have said a beach or a tropical or an inland. No, he said desert. So he's warning people about this false Christ that's going to be masquerading to the world to convince him that he's the real Christ. For as the lightning comes from the east and the flashes to the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man will be. For whatever the carcass, there will be the eagles gathered together. So forever the carcass is, the eagles will be gathered together. So he's talking obviously about the Son of Man, which is Son of Man being the second coming of Christ. And we talked about the eagles, we talked about the birds and the carcass. Like all of this is coming together. This is why you really have to read the Bible here, because obviously Jesus is making a reference here to Revelation 19 all the way in Matthew. So he's telling you in Matthew what is going to happen in this future time. And who is he talking to during this time period? He's talking to Israel. He's talking to the Jewish people who are going to be under this great tribulation in the future. So all of this comes back together. All of this happens for a reason here. I got a couple questions here in the chat, and I'll go back to you guys here for a second. Answers in Genesis guy from Australia. It's a great series about whom the Babylon is and why everyone will flock to it. Like I said, we talked about it here before, and like I said, I don't think that it is a coincidence that you're seeing so many people in this end time period that are all coming together with Roman Catholicism. And I don't think it's any coincidence that you're seeing all these people coming together for Islam as well. Nothing that you guys are seeing here is a coincidence. This is all biblical prophecy. We're seeing this essentially be laid out in front of our eyes. And the reason why we're seeing this is because everything that God has told you in this book is true, and it's all coming true. Wise we speak of Benny Hinn. Yeah, I know a lot of people have been talking about Benny Hinn. I always assumed Benny Hinn was a false teacher anyway. So I mean, obviously he has a massive following with like a lot of people. So some people are just a little bit more blind than others. Yep, Calvinism. We did a whole series about Calvinism. I say this, when I started that series, I wasn't as heavily against Calvinism as when I started, because I really started thinking about their teachings and whatnot. So look, I think we all know guys like, John MacArthur and Voddie Baucham and Paul Washer and like a few other people, Justin Peters. And I'll put it to you this way. They're good at debunking other heretics. So when they're talking about like Joel Osteen or Mike Todd or Stephen Furtick, of course they sound great, right? They sound like they actually know what they're talking about. But when you really get deep into the Calvinist beliefs, for me, and I'm just going to say this, that some people say maybe I'm being a little too extreme here. I think Calvinism is straight up demonic heresy. Like the same thing that I would probably say about Roman Catholicism, I would say about Calvinism, and here's why. Individually, what Calvinism does is, of course, it preaches that, the church has replaced the Jews, which is complete heresy in and of itself. It talks about, humans being totally depraved and being totally wicked and evil, which seems to be more of a demonic view of humanity than what God's view of humanity is. But the thing that I warn about the most when it comes to Calvinism is the teaching of limited atonement. This whole idea that, well, God actually didn't die for the world. He only died for the elect. So, and you hear people say this, and Calvinists will openly say this, that God didn't die for the world. He only died for his sheep. He didn't die for the goats. And that, he didn't die for everyone. Like here's the very dangerous problem with Calvinism here is that when you talk about the gospel, believing in the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, which is what saves us, when you start perverting what Jesus did on the cross and you start believing in a perversion of what he did on the cross, you start putting your faith to a gospel that's not going to save you. So a lot of people are going to believe in this false gospel that, well, Jesus didn't die for everyone. He only died for a few and everyone else is going to hell. It's like, no, that's not what the Bible says at all about Jesus, the sacrifice of Christ. But if you believe that, and with your heart, you believe that false gospel, you may be one of those people in Matthew 7 that has to hear from Jesus, "Depart from me, I never knew you." So what I tell people is, do not under any circumstance try to pervert what Jesus did for you on the cross. Because by doing that, you are playing with very, very dangerous waters. And as we showed you here in Revelation 19, you do not want to be an enemy of Christ during this time period. So please don't do stuff like that. So yeah, I will fully rebuke Calvinism just for that whole reason alone. So who else we have here? Marvel. Yeah, exactly, right. I saw that too. Not at all. But then again, I mean, it's a useful site for people who just want to bring up quick verses there. The guy who plays Jesus in The Chosen is a false Christ. People look to him and see, yeah, exactly. And I haven't really talked much about The Chosen either, but The Chosen has deceived a lot of people into thinking that this is somehow a true representation of who Jesus was. And it's like, look, if you were only looking at The Chosen as a television show, that's one thing. If you can look at The Chosen and say, okay, this is clearly television. This is not a true representation of Jesus. This is not who Jesus really was. I only look at this for entertainment value only and nothing else. And I could be like, okay, fine. You know what? If you're just looking at it for entertainment, have at it, right? Unfortunately, there's a lot of lukewarm Christians out there, people who call themselves Christians but don't know the first thing about the gospel, who watch The Chosen, who don't read the Bible, and they think that the Jesus that's being presented to you in The Chosen is the real Jesus. And they'll start to believe the things that The Chosen Jesus says and think that that's actual biblical doctrine. And those people are going to be they're going to be in for a very, very rude awakening, unfortunately. And another thing, I think the guy who plays Jesus in that show is also a Roman Catholic too, which should be another warning here that, there's a reason why the second commandment exists. Let's put it that way. Go back into the story of Sodom, and God would have saved the city if there was just one righteous man, so God died for all. You can also say that that's an allegory to the pre-tribulation rapture too, but like I said, we'll get to pre-tribulation rapture on another week. I just don't have the time to go deep into it here, but yeah, like I said, I never really was a fan of The Chosen, but just for that reason. But so like I said, the warnings are there. So the warnings are there, and God has warned you about what is to come. Now, believe it or not, not only does the Bible warn about this Christian and Catholic union here, the Quran also warns about this union as well. Yes, the Quran also says that there will be a time where Christians and Muslims come together. How do I get to this here? Well, there's a verse here in the Quran. I'm actually going to put this to you guys in the live chat, because look, as you guys know, that I am not very good at pronouncing names that are not American. So I'm not going to sit here and try to pretend like I know how to pronounce this, but I will give you guys the link to this yourself so that you can read it on your own hand. I will even give you guys the source of this as well, so you guys can check out everything that I'm giving you here. I believe this is called Sunan Abi Duat This is 42 and 39. So this is in the Quran. This is one of the hadiths too. So I forgot to mention that as well. So correct me if I'm wrong there. But this is also one of the beliefs of what essentially is going to happen during this time period where the Mahdi and the Muslim Jesus are coming together, and they're essentially going to war against the enemies of Islam here. And what does it say here? And we're saying, oh, sorry, I had to make sure to where exactly I was here. Yeah, here you go. And it says that you will make secure peace with the Romans. And I'll explain to you the context of what's happening here. It says you will make secure peace with the Romans, and then they will fight. And then you and they will fight an enemy behind you. So what it's saying here is that you are going to make a peace treaty with the Romans. And in the context of this verse, the Romans is talking about Christians, and I'll explain to you exactly why that's the case here. But it says, and they will fight an enemy behind you, which means that the Christians and the Muslims during this time period are all going to come together, and they're going to fight a common enemy. They're going to realize that, hey, we share an enemy out there, brother. So we're going to come together and we're going to fight side by side. And what is it going to say here? And then you will be victorious, talking about their side. You will take booty and you will be safe. Then they, being the Christians, will return in the middle of the mounds, and one of the Christians will raise a cross and say, the cross has conquered. So what is happening here is that when this battle happens and the Muslims and the Christians have their victory against whoever their enemy is, that the Christians are going to raise up a cross and they said the cross is conquered. Why is this a big no-no for Muslims? Because as I said earlier, Muslims do not believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross. They do not believe that he is the Son of God. So the Christians who foolishly sided with the Muslims during this time period are going to enact a cross to signal a victory between the Christians and the Muslim alliance. However, not realizing that during this time period, when we have the Mahdi on the earth and when we have the Muslim Jesus on the earth, the Muslim Jesus, who, keep in mind, is going to deny he ever died on the cross, that cross is going to be viewed as blasphemy against the Islamic religion. So what's going to happen here is that the cross has conquered. One of the Muslims will get angry and smash it. This is one of the promises of Islam during this time period, that they will break the cross. They're going to smash the cross, and the Romans will act treacherously and prepare for battle. Now, it goes on to say here that essentially that there's going to be a battle between the Christian army and the Muslim army. After their union, they're going to essentially fight against one another, and the Muslims will win. This is very interesting because what did we just read here in Revelation 17, when we talked about the harlot of Babylon being this false religious system of Rome, siding with the Antichrist, which is the beast and the false prophet, and that these two are going to go to war with each other, but the Muslims are going to win, and the Muslims are going to smash the Christian army during here. Now, it also says here that there will be a treaty between you and Banu Afur, the Romans, but they will betray you and they will march against you against 80 banners, and they should under each there should be 12,000 troops. So it's saying here that when they betray you, there's going to be essentially a large army of these Romans, quote unquote, that will go to war against you, but the Muslims will win. And also here, what I find very, very interesting, it says here that the truce between you and essentially the Romans is that there's going to be a high priest figure during this time period here. When you read this, a high priest figure that is supposed to come from the lineage of Aaron. So what are we talking about here? So Islam is saying that in the end times that you're going to make a peace treaty with the Romans, and in the peace treaty, a high priest that comes from the line of Aaron is going to make this treaty. Now, some people will interpret this to say this, that, well, if you look at Aaron, which is obviously talking about the brother of Moses in the Old Testament here, right? And the people say, well, Moses was the first high priest of Israel. That was kind of the connection there, that he was the high priest of Israel. So when they're talking about this union, some people say, well, the Romans in this context means the Jews, right? Well, no, that's not what it says at all, because you got to keep this in mind. One, you have to understand that when the Quran came together and when these hadiths came together, we're talking about the 6th century here. So you're talking about 610 and then on there. By that point in time, the Romans were very clearly understood as the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church had held as far as their Christianity roots during this time period. This is when we talk about the days of the Crusades and stuff like that. So understand that this verse was to Muslims, so Muslims would understand it very, very well who the Romans were. They knew that they weren't talking about the Jews, because the Jews come later on in this hadith here. So when they're talking about the Romans, it was very clear to the Muslims at this time period, and the Muslims now, it meant the Christians. So they're saying, well, okay, so you're saying that the Muslims are going to have a treaty of peace with a high priest from the line of Aaron. And the high priest at that time was Aaron, was the first high priest of Israel, right? So how does that relate to Christians? How is that going to be what Christian do you know is going to be a high priest that's going to have the power to make a treaty with Muslims? Well, you don't know any Christian like that. Are they going to make a treaty with Stephen Furtick, or are they going to make a treaty with Mike Todd or Joel Osteen or one of these people? It's like, no, here's what you have to understand. The high priest of Israel was essentially the first major religious leader of the Old Testament during that time period when they were making the nation. Talking about going back to those Exodus, there's the whole thing with like the golden calf and Aaron's role versus what Moses' role was during that time period. But when you look at that compared to today, obviously, if this is making a note to the Romans being Christians, what figure has enough power to essentially have a control and have a treaty with essentially Islam and the Antichrist during this time period? It would only be one figure. Who would be considered the highest priest of Christianity today to make this treaty? It would have to be the Pope, right? And it would have to be the Pope. If we're understanding this in the context of what they were explaining this to be, and we're talking about the Quran here. So obviously the Quran's making it very clear the Romans being the Christians, being the Catholics during this time period, and it's going to be a high priest from the line of Aaron, meaning that it's going to be someone who's a very high authority in the Christian religion that's going to make this peace treaty, is making a reference here to the Pope. Now, is there anything that we can know about the current Pope, Pope Francis, that would support this being a possibility, let alone a reality? Well, as you guys know, Pope Francis, the current Pope, has made leaps and bounds, a lot of, let's just call it progress, because that seems to be the word that everyone likes to use here, progress. But it's made a lot of progress here about improving relations between Muslims and the Roman Catholic Church. And he has really committed to this over the last several years. So is it possible? Let's just answer this question. Is it possible that Pope Francis is essentially the high priest that is being talked about here to make this union with Muslims and Catholicism? Now, I say it's a possibility. I don't say it's a certainty. Why? Because, well, we don't know for certain when this tribulation period will happen. Now, I know a lot of us feel like this is going to happen somewhere in the next few years. It could be another few decades from now. Who knows, right? We can't say for certain. So it could be Francis, or it could be another future pope. So we have to lay that out as a possibility that obviously Francis is the Pope now. We don't know who the Pope is going to be when the tribulation happens. So it could be him. It could not be him. So we're saying that this is only a possibility. We're talking about Francis here. But however, we do have an article here saying 5 lessons from Pope Francis committed a commitment to a Muslim Catholic dialogue. Now, Pope Francis has made many trips to Islamic nations over the last several years. I think Iraq, Saudi Arabia. I think this is in Egypt, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, sorry, this is Abu Dhabi. So this is the UAE. So, but he is speaking to one of the Egypt leaders, and we talked about Egypt a couple of times here beforehand. So, how is this going to work? How is there going to be a union here? Well, the first union that you guys are going to see here is that it is the lie that I've been fighting so hard against for so long. I'm going to continue to fight hard against this lie, because this is the lie that's going to lead to so much deception during this time period. It is the lie that, hey, Muslims, Catholics, Jews, we all worship the same God, right? We're all under the Abrahamic religions. We all worship the same. We're all on the same team, basically. And this is the basis that is going to make that transition easier for people to come into union with Islam. And here we go here. Worshiping together the one merciful God. Pope Francis folded his hands and sewed on his head. Now, this is back in 2015. when he traveled to the CIR, which is the Central African Republic, and he was visiting a mosque in the war-torn country. He took a moment to pray. And he said in the visit in Turkey and Istanbul, the Pope asked the city's Grand Mufti to pray for him. And later in Bangladesh, in the said an inter-religious gathering, Pope Francis asked a Muslim individual from Raniha, the refugee, to offer up prayer on behalf of the group. The Pope later said that his encounter brought him to tears. He says, in each of these prayerful moments, Pope Francis has put into practice the church teachings of affirmed in the Second Vatican Council that echoed in the catechism that Muslims together with us adore one merciful God. So this is written in catechism for the Roman Catholicism, right? So when we talk about what is the authority of Catholics, they obviously reject the Bible as their authority because they're taught that, well, the Roman Catholic Church compiled the Bible, so you can't use the Bible to go against church traditions and what the church and the catechism of the church believes. So when you see a lot of Catholics who argue, they'll argue based on the catechism of the church, not really based on the Bible. And the reason why is because, well, in Roman Catholicism, the church has the ultimate authority, period. Like that is really what it comes down to, is that the Roman Catholic Church has ultimate authority over Christianity, and you have to believe that as a dogma in order to be a Roman Catholic. And in the catechism, it is believed that Muslims and Christians worship the same God. So that is dogma, according to the Roman Catholic Church, and it has been affirmed multiple times by their present sitting Pope, that affirmed in the Second Vatican Council, echoed in the Catechism, that Muslims, together with us, adore one merciful God. So you kind of have to look at what's happening here. It's that whether you like it or not, your current Pope, I'm not saying he's the Pope that's going to make that union with the Antichrist, but your current Pope is basically laying the groundwork here by saying that we need to have a union between us two groups because at the end of the day, we worship the same God. I've clearly made the crystal clear case to you over the last several months that is not the case. As a matter of fact, Muslims, whether they know it or not, are worshiping Satan, because Islam is the religion of the Antichrist. It is the religion of Satan. It is quite literally Satan's deception. Now, I can go a step further and say, when we look at the Roman Catholic Church, that's also Satan's church. So you see Satan's church having a union with Satan's religion during this time period. This is why it's so easy for them to come together. I'll hold that thought here for a second, so I'm going to go down a little bit further. Doing theology together, acknowledging the wisdom together. So if you believe that Muslims and Catholics and Christians all worship the same God, then you see that there's no problem with essentially mixing elements of the faith and bringing two sides together. Now, this has been a long-standing tradition with the Roman Catholic Church. We mentioned it earlier about how when they tried to, or where they claimed that they converted pagan Rome into Christian Rome by essentially mixing elements of the faith together to create one faith. This is another big red flag here. What you're seeing here is you're seeing the steps of one world religion that is happening here. You're seeing this quite literally, the steps of one world religion. Going down here further, it says, sitting with the saints next door around the world. This is 2021 now in Iraq. Pope Francis visits another Muslim leader. Muslims, keep in mind, a very revered Muslim leader during this time period. So like Pope Francis is an elderly man known for his humility. So there's a few details of the Pope's time with him, but Francis said afterwards the meeting did good. It said, did my soul good. He's a light. These wise men are everywhere. Because God's wisdom has spread all over the world. Francis went on to frame Satini, which is from the Grand Ayatollah of Iraq there, that he is an everyday saint, and that one of the saints next doors, people who live out their values with coherence. So he's going as far now to say that Muslims are saints in the eyes of God. Why is this a problem, right? Because you claim that, well, we all worship the same God. Well, one religion says that Jesus Christ is God, says that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. He died on the cross for all of our sins, rose again 3 days, death, burial, and resurrection. Something that is a fundamental tenet of Islam is to deny this, to deny the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. So you have one group that says that Jesus died on the cross, he was buried, and he was resurrected, and another group that are saying the complete opposite. How can, in the eyes of God, the people who say the complete opposite are saints in the eyes of God? When I've read pretty verses in the Bible, we talk about the spirit of the Antichrist. Paul makes it very clear. John makes it very clear. Any person who says that Jesus Christ did not die on that cross is a spirit of the Antichrist, which is a spirit of Satan. So, in the eyes of God, there is no union here between Christians and Muslims. There's just not. Like I said, either you're on the side of Jesus or you're not. That's pretty clear what it is here. Watching a Politics Row show, I'm hitting hard, explaining to whom that Jesus is, and using the Quran to show the true Jesus to Muslims. Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you're doing that too, because there's a lot of people who really need to understand that the world is going to tell us that we all worship the same God. That is the lie that is going to lead us to big on the side of Satan during the tribulation here. Yeah, it's pretty old. Isn't it strange that the Catholic Church rarely gets messed up in Arab countries? You can almost say that. And here's another thing. You ask yourself, why is this being allowed to happen? It's not that it's being allowed to happen just for the sake of it. It's because this is what God said would happen during this time period. So if we truly believe what the Bible is telling us here about this false Christian Muslim alliance that's being built here, it's being built and it's happening because God said this would happen. And God said that in the future, this union is going to happen, and that the armies of the Antichrist will turn against the harlot of Babylon and destroy the harlot of Babylon. And there's a point here that I made once that I'll go back to once I'm done with this point, but I kind of want to catch up here. It's weird. I don't remember seeing any moon god when I visited the Vatican. It must have been yeah, exactly. And then they'll get 1,000 virgins and Queen Mary. By the way, I've mentioned this a few times here too, and this is not something that's mentioned in the article here, but I've said it too. It's like there's been, I think Francis has been on record by saying that, Mary is also essentially going to be used as a bridge for Catholics and Muslims, because we all know how much Roman Catholics venerate Mary. And even in the Quran, there's an entire book in the Quran dedicated to Mary. Now, obviously, it's not the Mary of the Bible, because the Mary of the Bible gave birth to Jesus Christ, the Son of God, in which the Quran completely denies. But because one side absolutely venerates Mary, and then the other side reveres Mary as a figure as well. I think there's even some hadiths out there that claim that Mary is like a wife of Muhammad in the afterlife. Like I said, I've heard that somewhere before. That I'm not sure that I'm not gonna say that that's 100% dogma, but I have heard that before. I don't know which group of Muslims do believe that, but that is something I've heard. So keep in mind, that's another part of this deception here, and we'll get to why this is going to happen. The other could be you to defending the dignity and all. So like I said, this is kind of this whole thing talking about, the mass migration of a lot of these countries. Pope Francis has been intimate meeting with their suffering, the international trips. And like I said, the Pope has been used as a figure to justify mass migration. He personally helped Muslim refugees in Vatican City. He's called on Western countries to set aside their anti-Muslim scapegoating and nativity, and essentially called for them to take in these Syrian refugees, these Muslim refugees. This is another thing that I've talked about too. When we talk about who the Antichrist actually is, there's a number of countries out there that believe that the Antichrist could originate from. Like some believe it could be Syria, some believe it could be Egypt. I know some people believe I think it's Iraq is another one, which I know a lot of people think it could be Iran, but I think those are the three primary ones as well. I do find it very, very interesting that with the whole Syrian conflict, that Muslim refugees from all over Syria and Libya essentially spread out to like all over the world, and who knows exactly where this figure is going to come from. It says that it comes from that region, but what does it mean it's going to come from that country? Who knows here? But the Pope was very, very on the side of mass migration during this time period as well. It says that it's not fair and it's not true. He calls on Western countries to set aside their anti-Muslim scapegoating, to essentially come together to help the Muslim people. Like I said, this Pope very much believes that Muslims and Christians are all one on the same side here. So if you're asking me, how is this whole thing going to work out? Well, the Pope, the leader of the church, the one who's the head of the church, the one who basically has the same position as Peter, if we're to believe Roman Catholicism, he is saying that there's room here for Muslims in this faith. That this is what he's claiming here. I have another verse just real quick. This is Hebrews 6 19 and 20. And this is kind of when you read this in this context, this is kind of another rebuke against Roman Catholicism when you really pay attention to what's being said here. Because, like I said, the Muslims believe that this covenant is going to happen with the high priest of Christian or Roman. So obviously, it doesn't matter which way you lace it. It's making reference to the Roman Catholic Church. But because, like I said, Roman Catholics believe that the Pope is the head of the church. In the eyes of Muslims, they believe that he is the head of Christianity or the head of the Christian faith. But what are we seeing here in Hebrews 6 19 to 20? It says here, this hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, that we enter, which we enters the presence behind the veil, where the forerunner has has entered for us, even Jesus, having become the high priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. So sorry if I butchered that name here. I just told you I'm not good with these names, but let me read that one more time just in case you can catch that. It says that where the forerunner has entered for us, even Jesus, having becoming the high priest forever according to the order, right? So what it's saying here is that who is the high priest of our religion, of our faith? It's Christ. It's saying very clear here that the Christ is the high priest of our faith. He's the one that essentially controls our destiny here. So to have a man here on earth called the priest, who's essentially taking that title away from Christ, should raise a lot of red flags with people when we talk about how this whole thing is going to play out, right? So you're seeing a lot. I think I'm actually going to add this one here too for you guys. Like I said, these are all references that you guys can check out on your own time. Like I said, I'm not giving you anything here that, well, I want to verify these sources. Hey, look, verify everything that I've said here. Everything I've quoted direct from scripture. I've used Islamic sources. I've used Catholic sources. So if you guys want to check out anything that I said and look into it on your own time, if you want to call me out on anything, I'm giving you guys all the sources that I've used for this thing. So just so that there's no confusion, because as I tell you here, never just take one person's word for anything, right? If you really want to get to the line of the truth, do your own research. Really look into these claims to see, is there any truth to them, or is there lies here? Did the Pope really make these statements about the Islamic religion, about Muslims, or is there something more to it? Check it out yourself. Like I said, I'm just using what you guys are saying here. I'm just using what the Bible says straight out of the text. I'm using what the Quran says, what the Hadith say. I'm using what the Pope's own words. So if you guys want to challenge me on anything that I'm saying here, or saying that I'm kind of taking things out of context, by all means, I just gave you guys all the sources there. So now I want to show you guys a few more videos here before we wrap things up here for tonight, which is one video after another showing you essentially this union that is being warned about. This union, which will quite literally be, we'll talk about the armies of Satan that rally against God. This is what this army is quite literally going to look like here. Real quick before I get back to you guys, I wonder how many Catholics know about Vatican II and Pope Francis. Like I said, it's not just Pope Francis either. I believe John Paul was also another strong Pope, I should say, about this, trying to merge this whole Catholic Muslim unity, this alliance between the Muslims and the Catholics. Because here's the thing, and we'll get to this here in a second. Why would Catholics and Muslims join up? Why would they come together, right? It can be right. It's not just going to be Catholics too. I believe there's going to be a lot of Christians in the tribulation who make this leap as well. Because why? We've talked about the lukewarm Protestant Christians out there, the ones who they only read their Bible 2 days out of the year, which is Easter and Christmas, which is the only time they actually show up to church. They don't know anything about the gospel. They don't know anything about Christ whatsoever. So when things start happening, and when I mean things start happening, I'm talking about what? Tribulation, rapture, the coming of the Mahdi, this Muslim Jesus bringing fire out of the sky, whatnot. They're going to be so panicked. They're going to be so confused. They're going to be looking for who they believe their leader to be. And when they see the Pope become the worldwide leader of what is to be Christianity, they're going to think, oh, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I should have joined the Roman Catholic Church. Maybe I should have sided with the Pope this whole time. It's because these people are going to be just as blinded as everyone else, as you guys have to understand here. But why would Christians and Muslims come together during this time period? Why would this happen? I explained to you guys that the false prophet, which I believe to be the Muslim Jesus, is going to be a very, very strong reason why these people are going to come together. Because when there's a man on earth claiming to be the real Jesus Christ, and he's doing these great wonders to an unbelieving world, to a world who has never known the true Christ and has never seen these type of things that they're going to be seeing during this time period, they're going to be like, this guy claims he's Jesus, and then he brings fire from heaven. Who are we to deny who he is, who he really is? So it's like, sure, he's saying that he never died on the cross. Sure, he's saying that, you know, he's actually a Muslim and that he's affirming the teachings of Muhammad, that he's affirming this Mahdi. But it's like, he's doing these great signs, and it's like, I've never seen anything like this before. He must be real, right? And the false prophet plays a pivotal role on why the world is going to essentially follow and worship the Antichrist, because he's going to deceive everyone into following the Antichrist, following the Mahdi. He's going to deceive everyone into taking the mark of the beast. And I've talked about this on a couple episodes too. People talk about what the mark of the beast is. In Islam, they teach, this is quite literally what they teach. Look it up yourself. I'm not making this up. That a beast will rise out of the earth during this time period, and that he will go around the entire world to mark the true believers and followers of Allah versus the disbelievers of Allah. And Muslims during this time period are encouraged to accept the mark that this beast that comes out of the earth gives, because by receiving this mark, they're going to be viewed as a true believer of Allah. So keep in mind, during the time period, the Mahdi is going to be on earth. This Muslim Jesus is going to be on earth. He's going to tell everyone to follow the Mahdi. He's going to tell everyone to follow the Islamic religion. And then when this beast arises out of the earth, and then these two entities are going to tell everyone, this is the beast from Allah. Take his mark, because taking his mark means that you're going to be a true follower of Allah. Like I said, it's the entire religion of Islam is Satan's complete satanic invert of what the Bible says. Everything God warned you not to do during this time period, Satan tells you to do it, because he knows that the people that he fools during this time period are going to be damned for all eternity. The ones who accept the mark of the beast, the ones who essentially pledge their allegiance to Satan during this time period, they're going to be damned for all eternity. They're going to be the ones who are going to be tortured by these demonic beings for 5 months during this time period. And then after all that, they're going to be tossed into the lake of fire when they go one-on-one with Jesus Christ during the end times. This is how far this deception is going. This is why Jesus said, if it were possible, even the elect would fall for the coming deceptions of the world. Pope Francis said that Mary will be a bridge to Islam 2017. Yeah, I remember him making that quote. I don't remember exactly when he did it, but he did say that. And like I said, in the bridge is already there, because in Islam, Mary is revered in the Quran, and obviously we know how much veneration she has in the Roman Catholic Church. So there's another angle there. I mean, if this Muslim Jesus comes in and he talks about, you know, how great Mary is and how we should revere Mary, that's obviously going to play very, very well into the Roman Catholics, who already venerate Mary to the degree that they do. So that's going to be another bridge that they'll use. This is why you see so much veneration of Mary, which is not in the Bible, but it's in the catechisms of the Roman Church and in the Quran. That should tell you something, that this is a coming deception. Catholic nonprofits helping illegal migrants. Now there's reports that ISIS may be coming through the southern border. ISIS has been coming through the southern border. Let me make that very, very clear here. It's not just Mexicans coming from the southern border anymore. There's people from the Middle East. There's people from China. There's people from South America. Like, it's not just people from like Mexico City and Tijuana who are coming from the border anymore. Those times are long gone. Like, people from all over the world are coming through our southern border right now, and it's happening for a reason. Biden and the government that is in charge right now is allowing this to happen, and they're allowing it to happen for a reason. The big from some small Mediterranean island we didn't know existed. Like I said, I know that there's verses in the Bible that does talk about the region that the Antichrist comes from. I know they said he's going to be Assyrian. And I do think this is interesting too. Like, I'm not going to make a dogmatic claim about this, but if you look at the Hadiths and you look at the Quran, when it talks about the Dajjal, right? We're talking about in Islam, they believe that the Dajjal is their antichrist. And he's going to be a figure who's going to claim to be the king of the Jews and the king of Israel. It's going to be Jesus Christ. Let's be very honest here. The Dajjal in Islam is the real Jesus Christ. Make that very, very clear. But one of the hadiths claim that essentially the Dajjal, quote unquote, their antichrist, is locked away on the island. He'll be released somewhere when Allah chooses to release him during this time, during this troubled time period, right? So Satan is claiming in his false religion that the Dajjal will be someone who's going to be locked away on an island to be released in a later time. Once again, is that Satan's satanic perverted way of saying that the Antichrist is actually somewhere on an island that we don't know about, who's just waiting to be released when the tribulation happens. Is it possible? I don't have enough information on that to say that it is. There's also other verses that I've read in the Quran that says that essentially the Mahdi will be someone who is chosen by Allah during this time period, that the Mahdi might be someone who doesn't know he's the Mahdi till later on. It could be the exact same thing that happens with Muhammad, right? Because Muhammad was appeared by an angel, Gabriel, what they claim. And here's something I found very, very interesting about that claim, just real quick. They claim that the angel Gabriel came and told him that Jesus Christ never was crucified, that God has no son, all this other stuff. And then somehow the angel Gabriel or Allah teleported Muhammad to Jerusalem to show him all of these things, right? It's literally the exact same thing that happened when Satan transported Jesus onto the top of the high mountain and basically told him that all the things of the world, all the kingdoms I will give to you if you bow down and worship me as God. So we've talked about, okay, who was that angel that Muhammad claimed that he talked to, that angel that Muhammad claimed he got this revelation from? When you read that verse and you read the similarities there, I think it's a very strong reality that it was in fact Satan himself who deceived Muhammad into creating the religion of Islam. Because this is what I've told people for many, many years. Satan is not some big scary red guy who's in hell, who's going to be there to torture you forever when you die and go to hell. The Bible makes it very, very clear Satan is here on earth. And Satan is here on earth actively deceiving the world away from Jesus Christ. So I truly believe that the angel that claimed that he was Gabriel was actually Satan, and he used Muhammad as a puppet to create the religion of Islam. That's what I truly believe happened there. So that's good. Yeah, like I said, I should work on pronouncing some of these names before I get on here. That's one flaw that I will easily admit to. So do not mistake my punctuation for ignorance. Just don't do that. I'll openly admit that there's a lot of names, especially when you talk about Arabic and Hebrew names that I kind of butcher every now and then. But you guys get the gist of what I'm saying. That's what I'm going with there. Look at the protesters for Palestine. There's some Catholics in that group. Oh, absolutely. We'll get to that here. So I watched Tim Pool for a bit. He literally said that we need someone to rise up and lead us. People are saying the thing, not realizing that they're saying the thing. There's a lot of people who are doing that. Angel moron. I should talk about. I'm going to do an episode about Mormonism too, because there is a verse that I also read not too long ago, which makes me believe that the angel who revealed Mormonism to Joseph Smith was probably also Satan as well. And that goes into the fact that Satan saw that there was a legitimate revival happening here in the United States of America, that people were in fact following the true gospel of Christ here in the United States. So he created a false religion to essentially deter people away from the true gospel. Now, I will say this, even though there's millions of Mormons out there, I don't think that his plan for Mormonism was as effective as his plan for the Roman Catholicism and Islam. However, at the end of the day, he's just trying to deceive as many people as he possibly can. So there are still people out there being deceived. I just don't think that Mormonism was as effective as a deception as he wanted it to be. So let's go here, because now we're going to show you guys a catalog of videos here. And what you're seeing, everything that we talked about here, there's a movement that is being portrayed right now saying that Christians, aka Catholics, and Muslims need to come together because we all have a common enemy. Who's our common enemy? The Jews. Who's our common enemy? The nation of Israel. There's a reason why you're seeing so many people right now in the world who are completely hostile towards the nation of Israel, because the nation of Israel is being looked at as genociders, as oppressors, as being saying that Israel is the nation of Satan. What you're seeing here is a narrative that a lot of people are buying into, and it's not just Christians and Muslims. You're seeing atheists buy into this, progressives, Hindus. You're seeing everyone come together. It's like everyone is saying that, you know, our enemy is Israel. We need to come together and fight the armies of Israel because they're the ultimate enemy. And as I said, why is it that the armies of the world are coming together to go to war against God? This is exactly why. So here's Nick Fuentes talking to, what's his name? Sneeko, whatever his name is. Nick Fuentes claims to be a Catholic. Sneeko claims to be a Muslim. Here's just a small little window of what we're talking about here during this end time deception.
It's actually kind of notable. I feel like you and me connecting was the beginning of what people now are calling this like Christian Muslim alliance against Zionists. And I feel like that was kind of the first iteration of it. It was when you and I started streaming, or when we first met a couple of years ago on that stream, and you then became a Muslim, and I'm, of course, I'm a Catholic. And then we were talking with Myron, who's also a Muslim, on Fresh and Fit about this a year ago. Then October 7th happened, and there's this thing on Twitter where Muslims and Christians are speaking out against Israel. And lately I've noticed that a lot of these like Jews and Zionist agents are coming out and trying to split apart the Christians and Muslims by saying, you know, they think there's this alliance, but, you know, Muslims are just as bad, or something like that, or saying, you know, well, Christians are weak and this sort of thing. And I don't think it needs to be more complicated than this. Israel colonizes Palestine. Israel colonizes America. Therefore, Muslims and Christians are working to dislodge Jewish power, which dominates both the countries. I mean, we don't agree on religion. We probably don't agree on a few other things. But in this limited sense, even if for nothing else, although I think we agree on more than that, I think we have a common cause.
So you heard them say it, and look, these guys have big followings on both of their sides, both the Muslim side and the Catholic side, and they're both saying that, you know what, the Jews have all this power and they're both oppressing us. We need to come together to fight the Jews, right? And this is the argument that's being made here about why we should come together. By the way, very, very interesting here, and like I said, maybe this would be like a future episode, because it seems like every week there's like a new topic I can talk about here. But a lot of, you know, the Fuentes types, they all talk about, you know, oh, well, it's the Jews that have all the power. Because if you look at the bankers and the executives and all this stuff, and they're all Jewish, and so it's all one big Jewish conspiracy theory. The people who spend so much time saying, point the finger at the Jews, look what the Jews are doing, you don't actually realize how, we talk about positions of power, how many people in positions of power over the world are actually Jesuits and Catholics. And people really don't talk about that because it's not like a popular narrative to go to here. But I know Catholics hate it when you point out the fact that Joe Biden is a Catholic. Well, yeah, I'm sorry, Joe Biden claims to be a Catholic. Like Nick Fuentes claims to be a Catholic. Now, you can say that he's a bad Catholic or blah, blah, blah. But look, it's something you guys probably need to understand. The overwhelming majority of Catholics, at least in the United States, I'm not going to say any other countries because I don't know their politics well enough, but at least here in the United States, the overwhelming majority of Catholics in the U.S. are actually left-wing. Like, I don't think people really realize that. I know people think that Catholics are like a based right-wing group. That's not really the case here in the United States of America at all. So it might be different in other countries. I say it might be different in other countries, but here in the United States, that is not the case. So I will go as far as to say that way in here. I said Jesuits, Freemasons. There's another one. We just talked about Candace Owens taking the picture at the Catholic Church, and we all saw the checkered flags and the pillars, and we all knew what that means. So I'm just saying, but he's not the only one. Nick Fuentes here making the argument that, hey, those Jews, those Zionists, we need to come together because they're going to come after us one day. And here's this is was it the president of Venezuela. Keep in mind, Venezuela has literally fallen into a communist hellhole over the last 10-15 years, and it was because they decided to go full socialism. They lost everything when the oil prices tanked. People starved to death. It got to a point where people were eating rats to live, and bakers were getting arrested because they were making illegal bread. And I'm not making a single thing of that up. That's what actually happened. Now it's a full-blown military communist dictatorship. And this is the guy who's saying that we need to go to war against the Zionists because they're the real problem in our society.
Ahora los racistas y supremacistas del sionismo hoy quieren acabar con el pueblo palestino. Y digo más, quieren acabar con todo el pueblo árabe, con todo el pueblo musulmán. Han sembrado una ideología del odio, de la racia. La han sembrado durante 75 años con el apoyo de Occidente. Atención, mundo bueno que me escucha. Atención, hombres y mujeres de los Estados Unidos, de Europa y del mundo. Han sembrado una ideología más peligrosa que la nazi. Primero contra el pueblo palestino. Racia, exterminio, genocidio, bombas atómicas. Y luego vienen los pueblos árabes, todos los pueblos musulmanes. Y después quieran venir por nosotros, los cristianos, los católicos. Paremos al tiempo el genocidio. Paremos a tiempo el genocidio sionista contra el amado y pueblo palestino.
So, once again, world leaders, we're talking about world leaders here, all coming together to side with Palestine in this conflict. So, when you're seeing this conflict ramp up around the world, where people are really starting to get super heavy on one side or another about who we should side with, should it be Palestine? Should it be Israel? And you're seeing these lines in the sand being drawn up. Understand that what you're watching, whether you want to admit it or not, you're watching biblical prophecy play out in real time. That's exactly what you're seeing. By the way, just in case you didn't know, and another example of what we talked about here in Revelation 17, when we talk about the control that the Roman Catholic Church has over the world, the nations, and the tongues, Venezuela is a country that is 71% Roman Catholic. 71% Roman Catholic in Venezuela. So even they're saying we need to come out against the Zionist Jews to side with the Palestinian Muslims during this conflict. Here's other videos here. There's a couple other videos that you see here of Orthodox Christians. Like I said, I haven't done one about the Orthodox Christians yet, but I mean, let's put it this way. I stand firm by saying that Orthodox Christianity, like Eastern Orthodox and that whole thing, they're basically Roman Catholics without the Pope. That's really what they are. And I know a lot of people get really angry when I say that. However, they mostly believe a lot of the same things. I'll have to do a future episode to prove this to you, but I'm just saying here, do not think that the Orthodox Christians are any better when it comes to Roman Catholicism. I mean, versus Roman Catholicism, they're really not. But here's more videos of people around the world, Christians and Muslims, coming together for the sake of Palestine. So there's one video. Here's another video. This is Christians, Jews, and Muslims. This is in Texas. So if I had to guess, I would probably say this is what, Austin? Like, I don't think they say specifically what city this is in, but Austin or Dallas would be my two guesses if this is taking on in Texas. But more people coming together to decide with Palestine. So you're saying it there again. You're saying this is all stuff that's going on in our world right now. Here's, I think this is in Russia, if I'm not mistaken. Muslims and Christians, like I said, Eastern Orthodox. I just mentioned this here, coming together side by side here. By the way, all I have to say with Russia, keep an eye on Russia, because I haven't talked much on this podcast about Gog and Magog, but a lot of people believe that Gog and Magog is a war that's going to happen in Russia. And all I'm saying, as far as Russia goes, I'm pretty sure they have about a 35% Muslim population there, so there could be a conflict there. So Russia's another country that I would pay attention to when you're looking at end times prophecy. So let's put it that way. So yeah, and even the awesome one points out Ezekiel 38, which once again it's another verse in the Bible that ties into the story that we're telling here. It goes into Revelation 19 about God literally coming down to fight the armies of the Antichrist, wiping out the armies of the Antichrist, wiping out the enemies of Israel. So what you have to understand here, and this is, like I said, this is a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow here when we talk about this, but this is a pill that you're going to have to swallow. As much as you hate the nation of Israel right now, as much as you despise Israel, Jesus Christ is going to come back to save Israel in the future. And that is something that was going to happen. So some of you guys are talking about, 70 AD, they destroyed the temple and then he was done. It's like, that did happen. No one's saying that it didn't happen. However, that was not what Revelation is talking about here. Revelation is talking about a great war between God and Satan that will take place during this time period. And that Jesus Christ's second coming is all about him coming back for his people, which is Israel. And that a remnant of Israel will be saved. So look, a lot of you guys saying that we're against Zionism, we're against Jewish rule, we're against the Jewish people. Guess what? You're putting yourself right now on the side of Satan in the war versus him and God. Whether you want to accept this or not, this is what's going to happen. And final point here, this is kind of what's write this whole thing home. Actually, let me grab this one here so you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about. This is a post from Twitter not too long ago. Just go ahead and say this. This is from their perspective, right? This is not from my perspective. This is from their perspective. Listen to what's happening here. The sooner all Christians, whether Catholic or Protestant, and all Muslims, whether Shia or Sunni, set their differences aside and come together to oppose and resist the Zionists and the Jewish state and put stop to their evil and demonic agenda, it will be better for humanity. How can a nation that thrives on carnage, ethnic cleaning, genocide, mass murder, and feeds on racism, apartheid, religious intolerance, and injustice, that rejoice in killing of women, children, babies, and giving pride a place in the commodity of nations? And how can they possibly have the nerve to describe themselves as God's chosen people? So this is what Satan is attacking so hard right now. This is what you have to understand here. Now on the multiple fronts, not only just the Islamic side, but in the Christian side too. Satan wants you to believe that the Jews are not God's people. They want you to believe, Satan wants you to believe that the Jews are not God's people. He wants you to believe that Israel is not God's nation. And he needs you to accept this, because when you accept this as a reality, then you are far more likely to side with him when this leader finally does arise from the world. And what you're seeing here is that all over the world, all of these nations are coming together against Israel and against the Jews. When we finally get that one leader who's against Israel, he's against the Jews, and he will rally the entire world to come against the Jews and to against Israel. Satan wants you to believe that the Jews are not God's people and that Israel is not God's nation. That way you will side with him in a war against God. That is what is happening here. So if you're listening to people who are post-millennial, all-millennial, who are preterists, who are trying to tell you that the book of Revelation already happened, this is not a future event that's going to happen, stop listening to those people, because those people are intentionally leading you astray to what is about to happen. And what I'll finish this point here. Israel of today, like Nazi Germany, has so much blood on its hands. It's not the Israel of yesterday. Once again, Satan's trying to tell you or trying to convince you that the Israel in the Bible is not the Israel that exists today. This is where we get replacement theology and covenant theology, because even those Christians, like Catholics, like Calvinists, like Presbyterians and other groups, all want you to believe that the nation of Israel that exists today is not God's nation. You have to believe this in order to essentially side with him in the last days. The Israel of King David, which was the Israel of yesterday, loved and revered God and had a place in his heart. But the Israel of today, which is the Israel of Netanyahu, hates and despises God and is beloved by Satan. That's what he wants you to believe. So he wants you to come as far against this nation as possible, because guess what? Time is coming near. The time is coming near where this war, this battle of Armageddon, which we led off the show about, this battle between God and Satan, is going to happen. So we started off this show asking the question, how is it possible that when Jesus Christ comes in with the armies of heaven from above, and he comes down here to make war, why is so many of the nations lining up to go to war against God? How could this possibly happen? You're seeing throughout the course of this entire night how this happened, because Satan has deceived the world into making them believe that this nation of Israel that exists, these chosen people of God, the Jews, they're not real Israel. That's not really God. Actually, the church is really Israel. So that's what you got to understand. That nation is a false nation. It's a satanic nation. We should not side with them. I'm pretty sure if you guys have been on Twitter long enough, you heard plenty of people like, what's that guy's name? The Reformed Patriot, whatever his name is, who literally spends 90% of his time on social media trying to convince everyone that Israel is a demonic nation that needs to be destroyed, and that anyone who sides with it needs to be stopped. That's literally his whole shtick, right? He's not the only one. You're saying that people are coming together right now against Israel. They're coming together against the Jewish people. And then what's going to happen here? We're seeing the first step of this final deception. Now, there's other steps to come that have not happened yet, but when these deceptions happen, when we get this Islamic leader who's going to lead the world against Israel during this time period, when we get a false Jesus Christ on the earth, masquerading himself as the real Jesus to deceive people into siding with this demonic figure, when the hate for the nation of Israel grows to the point where the entire world has come together to go to war with Israel, the stage is already going to be set for these people to bring forth what we see in Revelation 19. And what we're going to see is that there's going to be a whole lot of people in the world, and they're going to be completely deceived, and they're going to be on a battlefield, a literal battlefield, staring down Jerusalem, and opposing them is going to be God himself, Jesus Christ. And they're going to think to themselves, we need to go at war with this person. Why? Because he's the Dajjal. He's not the real Jesus. He's the great deceiver. He's the great deceiver Messiah. Don't listen to anything that he says. We need to go to war with him. And then they're going to actually go to war against the real Jesus Christ. And then what's going to happen? Jesus is going to wipe the floor with all of them. And the torment that these people are going to endure for siding against God during this time period, for siding against him, whether it's demonic locusts or demons or Nephilim or the birds from heaven that are going to feast on their flesh, to the people who are going to be thrown alive into the lake of burning fire. These people have no idea what is coming, but it is happening right now. And I'm telling you now, if you're listening to this sometime in the future, some of the things start to click for you guys, and you're like, oh no, I'm not like where this is going. Let me just tell you this right now. During this time period, do not buy into this narrative of a Christian-Muslim alliance, because that is demonic. That is going to be led by Satan himself. Do not listen to this. If there is a false Jesus Christ on this world who's bringing fire from heaven, and he's telling everyone he's the real Jesus, but he's Muslim, he's telling you to follow the Mahdi, do not listen to him, just like Jesus said. And by all means, do not make the mistake of being on the side against the nation of Israel during this time period, because it will not end well for you. And I'm not just saying this as a warning or an opinion. God has given you this warning now for nearly 2,000 years. He gave you this warning for a reason, because this event is coming and so many people are going to fall for this. This is your warning now to turn away from what's about to happen here, because what is about to happen is going to be a quite literally a biblical event. And like I said, you do not want to be on the opposing side of God. So how do you get on the right side of God? Very easy. Believe on the gospel of the real true Jesus Christ, the real true Jesus Christ who died for the sins of the world on the cross. He was buried, he was resurrected for 3 days. He is the Son of God, and he will return. The true Jesus Christ, the true Son of God, will return, and he will come back. I hate to break this to some of you people. He will come back to defend his people. And then that leads us into the millennial kingdom, but that's a whole other conversation for another day. We're just talking about the warnings of the tribulation right now. We'll discuss the millennial kingdom later on. So that's all I got for this episode here. I know we went a little bit long, but there was a lot to go through here on this episode. So I'm glad you guys joined me. What are we talking about next week? Next week is episode number 42 of the Bible Lens. What is next week's episode? Well, we talk about this Christian deception. Obviously, Catholicism is a major key point of this Christian deception. But there's another point of this Christian deception that really doesn't get talked about. And we need to talk about this because I've had several conversations with people, with posters on Twitter, with people inside the church, outside the church. And one of the biggest deceptions of the church that is happening right now, it's probably happened to a church you guys have been a part of and you guys have been to, is that there is a growing number of people who claim to be Christians who have essentially denied all authority and all teachings of the Apostle Paul. They say that Paul weaseled his way into the Bible. He shouldn't be in the Bible at all. We shouldn't listen to anything the Bible that Paul wrote because he's not Jesus. He's not our authority. We shouldn't listen to him. I'm going to let you guys know right now. We're talking about this. We're talking about end times prophecy. Next week on this show, I'm going to explain to you in detail while hating the Apostle Paul, the one who quite literally gives us the gospel that saves us, that denying Paul is what creates apostasy in the church. This is what causes the great falling away of the church, the great falling away from the faith, is when you deny the authority and the teachings of Paul. I will explain this to you next week here on the show. Go ahead and give a shout out to everyone who joined us here tonight on this show. Awesome one, Leslie Tarkin, Brandon, the casual gamer. I know Vanya was here with us a little bit earlier on the show. Dante was here a little bit with us earlier on the show. I think Keith was over on our Rumble side. So thank you all you guys for joining me here. It is a very important episode and an episode of things that needs to be talked about in our world because it's happening right now, whether you like it or not. This coming Tuesday, we'll be doing episode 97 of the Barroom Podcast, and we're going to be reviewing the Boy Kills World movie. We'll talk about the Alec Baldwin situation. We'll talk about the Scream situation. We might even talk about this new movie that Zoe Kravitz is directing. Is this another case of predictive programming where they're telling you what they're doing behind closed doors and yet they're presenting to you as fiction? We'll talk about this as well on Tuesday nights. Tuesday is going to be a very important episode for you guys, but that's happening on Tuesday at 9 p.m. And then next Sunday here at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific, we'll talk about while denying Paul or rejecting Paul leads to apostasy. So thank you very much for joining me for tonight's episode. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you start doing your own research into some of these topics and see, maybe, like I said, maybe we're a lot closer to the end here than any of us are willing to admit. Maybe there's some things going on here that are quite literally biblical prophecy that's playing out right in front of our faces. Check that out. Do some more research. I will see you guys next week here on the show. Thank you very much. Adios. Goodbye. Good night.
Behold, and
that was the wrong button. I was supposed to press the intro. That was the intro, not the outro. Now I can officially say good night. Right.
Once I turned to Jesus and I realized how he had changed my outlook on life, not just softball, but understanding how much I have to live for, and that's living to exemplify the kingdom. And I think that brings so much freedom.
David, I know share a strong faith. How does that help you on a night like tonight?
It's everything. Christ's resurrection is everything. Not just his life, but his death and resurrection. You can only get that through him, the Holy Spirit only through him. No false prophets, no Muhammad, no anyone else. Only Jesus Christ himself.
Let me tell you one more thing. This might be the most important thing you'll ever hear. There is true freedom, a freedom that no one can take from you in the name of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Don't ever forget that. If you remember one thing I say, remember that.
And I've got lots to tell you. Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and you will be saved.
Is that your reaction to what people who want you off the spotty shortly?
Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and you'll be saved.
And what about you being stripped of your belt? I mean, that's you must be very unhappy with that. What's your reaction to that?
Jesus loves me. He loves you too, and he loves you too. He loves these people in here, and he loves everybody in the world. All you've got to do is repent of your sins, and you will be forgiven.